In today's video, we will share the heartbreaking story of Grace Millane, a vibrant young woman who loved to travel and was exploring the world when her life was tragically cut short. Grace's story is one of adventure, trust, and betrayal, raising important issues about the risks of online dating. Grace Emmy Rose. Millane was born on December 2nd, 1996, in Essex, England. She was the youngest of 3 children, with 2 older brothers, Michael and Dean. The Millane family was known for their friendly and genuine nature. Often called Gracie by her father, Grace was seen by her friends and family as caring, kind, and full of life. The family lived in the same home from the time Grace was just 9 years old. They created many cherished memories there, enjoying time with pets, celebrating holidays, hosting summer gatherings, and travelling together in Europe. Grace began her education at St Joseph's Catholic Primary School and continued through Brentwood Ursuline Convent High School, finishing at St Thomas More High School. Grace was popular with her classmates due to her outgoing personality and her knack for making friends. Her school chaplain, Claire Bailey, described her as bright and energetic, with a smile that could light up a room. Besides being a talented field hockey player, Grace was also an artist who shared her work on social media, with one of her pieces even displayed in galleries in London. After high school, Grace attended the University of Lincoln in England. Initially, she was in a long-term relationship from high school, but they broke up after the first year. During her college years, Grace worked in her F. Athers office while pursuing her passion for art, excelling in the subject. Even with a loving family and many friends, she felt a strong desire to travel. This passion was recognised by her brother Michael. In 2018, Grace graduated with a degree in marketing and advertising, eager to start a backpacking trip she had been planning. Ready for this exciting new chapter of travel and adventure, she remained true to her kind-hearted nature, even donating her hair to a charity that helps create wigs for children with cancer. She began her journey in October 2018, starting in Peru, where she shared many cheerful updates with her family. After a month in Peru, she travelled through South America and reached New Zealand by mid-November. Friends noted that Grace was particularly excited about visiting New Zealand, as it was a highlight of her trip before heading to Fiji and Australia later. On November 30th, 2018, Grace checked into a hostel called Base Backpackers in Auckland and met other travellers. That same night, she matched with a man on Tinder. The next day, December 1st, just before her 22nd birthday, they arranged to meet. Initially hesitant, Grace eventually agreed to go out to Sky City. Dressed in a little black dress and white sneakers, she was set for a fun night. Before leaving, she took a photo of a large Christmas tree in the courtyard and sent it to her parents to share the joy of her trip. The day after her birthday, December 2nd, Grace's family and friends started sending her messages and well wishes. However, they noticed something strange. Grace wasn't responding. Calls to her went straight to voicemail, causing concern among her loved ones. After several days of silence on December 5th, Grace's parents contacted the Auckland police to report her missing. At first, the police were not too concerned about Grace's disappearance. They thought she might have been out late with friends after having a few drinks. Perhaps her phone had run out of battery, or she was simply sleeping off a hangover. However, when they checked with the hostel where Grace was staying, they discovered that she had never returned, and her belongings were still there. As posters asking for information about her spread around the area, detectives began looking at security camera footage to track her last movements. They quickly identified a man who had been with Grace during her final night out. The footage showed Grace meeting him by a Christmas tree, one she had sent her family a picture earlier that evening. They seemed to share an awkward hug before leaving together. The videos highlighted many moments from that night, showing Grace and her date moving between different bars, appearing affectionate and even sharing kisses. However, one troubling moment was caught on camera. Around 9:20 p.m, while Grace was in the restroom, her date was seen rummaging through her purse, which raised serious concerns for the police. Grace's friend Amina Ashcroft mentioned that they had been in touch throughout the date. Grace seemed to be enjoying herself, although Amina noticed some warning signs in her messages. Grace had told Amina she felt a strong connection with the guy, but her last message said she would fill her friend in on what happened the next day. The timeline from the videos indicated that Grace returned to her date's apartment at 9:40 p.m, the night before her birthday. As detectives dug deeper, they looked at Grace's social media and found a strange comment from her date on one of her Facebook photos shortly after the purse incident. He called her beautiful and radiant, which only added to their worries. They eventually identified the man in the footage as 26-year-old Jesse Shane Kempson. Jesse Kempson was born on December 28, 1991 in Lower Hutt and grew up in Wellington. His early life was not easy. After his parents separated when he was 9, he was mainly raised by his father and grandfather. This upbringing was quite different from Grace's seemingly perfect family life. People who knew Jesse often shared negative opinions about him. Many described him as a compulsive liar. His stepbrother even called him a pathological liar who liked to control others. Jesse had a habit of telling outlandish stories, like claiming he had terminal cancer or that he was connected to gangs. When Jesse lived in an apartment building called City Life, his landlord initially thought he was a successful sales manager at Woolworths, one of the largest supermarket chains in Australia. This seemed reasonable since many professionals lived there. However, the landlord became suspicious when he noticed Jesse wandering the halls at odd hours. Eventually, he learned that Jesse's rent was actually paid for by government assistance, not the impressive job Jesse had claimed to have. In addition to inventing various false identities, Jesse pretended to be everything from a businessman to a professional softball player. In reality, his last job was in telephone sales, and he had been fired on the same day he met Grace because of lying. The police were on the lookout for Jesse after seeing his image on surveillance cameras and social media. When he returned home and spotted the officers, he tried to avoid them and quickly left the area. One of the officers noticed his behaviour and chased after him. A nearby worker watched everything unfold, and eventually the police caught up with Jesse and brought him in for questioning. During the questioning, Jesse shared what happened the night before. He mentioned meeting a woman at a place called Sky City, but was unsure if she was genuine because he had heard of many people being misled on dating apps like Tinder. He said they exchanged a hug and a kiss on the cheek and planned to keep in touch. However, investigators were doubtful of his story since security cameras had clearly recorded him with the woman as they left the elevator and headed toward an apartment. The police also searched Jesse's small apartment, which was the last place anyone saw a woman named Grace. Their investigation uncovered some troubling aspects of Jesse's life. He was estranged from his family and had recently been diagnosed with anxiety. He had a history of troublesome relationships, with women describing him as controlling and overpowering even early in dating. Although he initially seemed well presented, many soon found him intrusive, as he often asked very personal questions about their past. Numerous women described him as creepy, highlighting that his behaviour extended beyond just making uncomfortable comments. On top of that, Jesse was facing serious personal problems. He was behind on rent and had recently lost his job, which seemed to contribute to his downward spiral as his lies started to catch up with him. Meanwhile, Grace's family and friends were anxiously trying to get in touch with her, hoping to celebrate her birthday together. Luckily, there was a significant amount of surveillance footage available that helped detectives track Jesse's movements on a worrying day. They had to go through a huge amount of video data from the building where he lived. On December 2nd, which was Grace's birthday, the footage showed Jesse entering an elevator alone at 8 a.m. He then went to a shopping centre called the Atrium, arriving about 7 minutes later. The detectives observed him shopping, where he bought a suitcase and some cleaning supplies. Later that morning, around 11 a.m, Jesse took a taxi to a car rental place and rented a red Toyota Corolla. Curiously, just a few hours later, he went on a date through Tinder. When police spoke to the woman he dated, she mentioned feeling very uncomfortable during their time together. He made some alarming comments, including that he was looking for a big bag for sports gear, and even made disturbing remarks about murder. The woman recounted how Jesse expressed it was strange that someone could end up in prison for life over just one mistake. He even shared a story about a friend who had a scary encounter related to rough sexual play that ended with charges of manslaughter. To make matters worse, Jesse claimed that police dogs could only find bodies buried deeper than 4 feet. Understandably disturbed, the woman ended their date and declined a ride home from him. Despite this, Jesse continued his day by buying more cleaning supplies and renting a carpet cleaning machine, telling the store employees it was for red wine spills. Later footage captured him returning to his apartment with the cleaning machine just before 9 p.m. That same evening, around 9:30, He was seen pushing a trolley loaded with 2 heavy suitcases into the elevator and loading them into the trunk of his rental car. He appeared calm and even joked with an employee as he returned the empty trolley to the lobby. The next morning, on December 3rd, Jesse went out shopping again, this time buying a shovel around 7 a.m. He chatted casually with the cashier, making it seem like he was just running errands. After shopping, he dropped off some bags at a dry cleaner, then went to a car wash. At the car wash, he was caught on camera, cleaning the rental car thoroughly before returning it. Interestingly, he left the shovel he had just bought leaning against the wall of the car wash, almost as if he wanted to avoid leaving any evidence behind. On December 5th, the same day Grace was reported missing, Jesse was seen carrying bags and tossing them into various trash bins around the city. That day, Grace's father, David, travelled to Auckland to help in the search for her. On December 7th, he made a heartfelt plea to the public, asking for assistance in finding his beloved daughter. He appeared deeply saddened and heartbroken as he spoke, pausing frequently to compose himself. While David tried to keep hope alive, the police named Jesse as a person of interest and expressed serious concerns for Grace's safety. When detectives first questioned Jesse, he insisted that he and Grace had said goodbye on the street around 10 p.m. and that he hadn't heard from her since. He even claimed she had blocked him on Tinder. On December 8th, detectives talked to Jesse again, and his story had changed quite a bit. Now he claimed that after they returned to his room, both of them were quite drunk and started kissing. He said they talked about the book 50 Shades of Grey and themes of bondage during this time. Jesse described how they began to get intimate and said it felt normal. He then shared that Grace mentioned she liked certain things and had tried them with her previous partner. According to Jesse, during their encounter, Grace held him around the neck and asked him to hold her throat and go harder. He claimed that by the end they had ended up on the floor. Afterwards, Jesse said he got up to take a shower but fell asleep in there. He remembered waking up and crawling back into bed, but it was dark and he assumed Grace had left. Jesse told the police that when he woke up the next morning, he found her on the floor with blood coming from her nose. He panicked but maintained that it was just an accident related to a rough game they were playing, not murder. However, at the end of the interview, the detective informed Jesse that he was being arrested for the murder of Grace. When the police searched Jesse's room, they discovered that blood, which was associated with Grace, was everywhere, something that suggested more had happened than just a nosebleed. Jesse cooperated with the detectives and led them to the place where he buried Grace. Disturbingly, this was the same area where he had mentioned to a Tinder date that something terrible had happened while Grace's body was still in his room. Detectives managed to locate Grace's body around 4 p.m. on December 9th near Scenic Drive in the Waitakere Ranges, about 12 miles west of Auckland City. Detective Inspector Scott Beard spoke to the media at the scene, confirming that they believed the body was that of British traveller Grace Millane. He shared that the case had been especially difficult for him as he had a daughter the same age. This tragic event not only affected Grace's family, but also touched the hearts of many across the country, with thousands attending vigils to remember the young traveller who was just starting her adult life. New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern became emotional as she expressed her heartfelt apology to the family of Grace. She stated that Grace should have been safe and acknowledged that she wasn't. The Prime Minister also offered support to the family during this difficult time. On December 10th, just 9 days after Grace went missing, Jesse appeared in court with his identity kept secret. The details from the autopsy presented in court were shocking, and Jesse's behaviour made him seem even more sinister. The findings confirmed that Grace had suffered serious harm, with injuries found on her arms and chest indicating she had been attacked. The pathologist explained that the pressure applied to her neck was sustained for 4 to 5 minutes with significant force. Further investigations revealed that Jesse had searched for information about the specific area where Grace's body was ultimately discovered, hidden inside a suitcase. Disturbingly, he then took inappropriate photos of Grace and shared them on an online platform. In November 2019, a high-profile trial began focusing on Jesse, who was accused of murdering Grace. The prosecutor described the crime as deliberate and cruel, emphasising the disturbing nature of the act. He explained that Jesse likely kept his hand on Grace's neck for about 5 to 10 minutes. which caused her to lose consciousness, but he continued his actions without hesitation. On November 22nd, 2019, after just 5 hours of deliberation, a jury made up of 5 men and 7 women found Jesse guilty of murder. He was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 17 years that he must serve before being eligible for parole. Jesse's own family expressed their disappointment in him, calling him a pathetic fantasist. The lead investigator on the case believed that if Grace hadn't been the victim that night, Jesse would have likely harmed someone else instead. Even though Jesse was sentenced to life in prison, it did little to ease the pain of Grace's family. After the verdict was read, her parents spoke to the media, and it was heartbreaking to witness their grief. Grace's dad tearfully remarked that the pain of losing their daughter would stay with them for the rest of their lives. To add another heartbreaking layer to this story, Grace's father, David, faced his own tragedy shortly after the trial. At just 61 years old, he was diagnosed with terminal cancer. His passing after a short struggle brought even more sorrow to the family, who were still coming to terms with Grace's unexpected death. In honour of Grace's memory, her family and friends have organised 2 campaigns. The first is called the Love Grace campaign, which collects handbags filled with essentials for women escaping difficult situations. This idea came from Grace's own love for handbags, and it's a way of supporting women in need by providing them with practical items. Additionally, Grace's loved ones raised over £1,000 for White Ribbon UK, a campaign aimed at ending male violence against women. Grace was deeply loved by many, and these initiatives reflect her spirit and values. One of her friends shared that Grace loved her family and friends completely, and it's clear that losing someone so special is incredibly painful for those left behind. However, they continue to remember Grace as someone who always had a beautiful smile that could brighten any room. Jesse is the man whose name was kept secret for some time after he was convicted of murder. This name suppression was lifted after he lost an appeal against his conviction and sentence. His name had been concealed because he went through 2 separate trials for sexual offences, for which he was also sentenced. In October 2020, Jesse was found guilty of causing serious harm to a former partner in multiple ways, physically, emotionally, and financially. She accused him of controlling her and emptying her bank accounts. As a result, he received a sentence of 7.5 years for 8 different charges in November 2020. Additionally, he was found guilty of sexually assaulting a young woman he met on Tinder less than a year before Grace's murder. This 21-year-old came forward after recognising Jesse from the news about Grace's case. In court, she described how he had threatened her, warning that he would kill her and her family if she ever told anyone about his actions. Because of this, he received a sentence of 3.5 years in prison. During the hearing, Jesse lost control and shouted at the judge, insisting that the conviction was unfair. The judge pointed out that Jesse showed no remorse for what he had done, which is truly unsettling. Jesse had spent a long time pretending to be someone he wasn't, but the truth has come to light. He is a liar, a sexual predator, and a murderer. Sadly, Grace discovered who he really was far too late. Just before her 22nd birthday, when she was beginning to explore her independence, he ended her life. This tragic act left her family and the community devastated, mourning the loss of a bright young woman who had so much to offer. It is a heartbreaking and incomprehensible situation, one that will never be forgiven. Thanks for joining us for today's story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to give a thumbs up and share your thoughts in the comments. And if you're new here, hit subscribe and tap the notification bell to stay connected with us. We'll see you next time.